So, Angelo, let's just start with who are the Proud Boys?
They are probably the most well organized and part of the men's rights movement. And so basically, the Proud Boys are, as they would describe themselves, Western chauvinists. And that's just to put it simply. They have chapters. They do meetings. They're not just sort of like participants in online forums like I think a lot of the men's rights movements are. They actually do stuff in public, as we are now seeing.
Okay, we got to go a little broader than that because I just think that the everything you just said probably strikes normal people as being absolutely bizarre. We have a group of adult males who are in their 20s, 30s. Their leader, I think, is late 40s, Gavin McInnes. We'll get to him in a moment. And they all wear Fred Perry collared shirts. And they're in a basically He-Man, women hater, non-Western civilization hater group. It's like a youth group, but for theoretically grown men.
That's right, and they consider themselves to be sort of like a fraternal order. They have levels of participation. So, like the first level is you actually have to identify yourself officially as a Proud Boy, and you have to make that a publicly known statement. It's not something that you shy away from. You have to actually explicitly say that, identify that in some of your either public communications or on your social media profiles. Like you have to make it known. The second level is when things start to get a little stranger. You have to commit to giving up masturbation. It's a really important part of moving through the ranks, and it's something that they insist people commit to as they sort of go through it. And then as a part of that initiation, what happens is that you get beat up by other Proud Boy members of higher rank while you list your 5 favorite cereals. And then the third part of it is when you actually get a tattoo. A marking, and then
Angela, you're saying these things like they're not absolutely bizarre. You've got to get beat up while you're saying your 5 favorite breakfast cereals.
Yeah. And it's a real thing. These are places that they are a pretty well organized group. They've been growing pretty steadily the last couple of years because they're tapping into this sort of energy that is sort of percolates within the larger anti-PC men's rights movement. And so it's just like a funnel. You sort of start with big picture kind of stuff, and then you slowly, recruit people and work them down. The fourth level is where it gets scary, though, and sort of it goes from being weird to sort of scary. Is that actually the highest level of being a Proud Boy is when you commit violence for the cause. That's how they describe it, and it is the most honored thing you can do, and you are recognized as such when you get to that level. And what we saw on Friday in New York City, it wasn't just that it was an outlier or a random example of the Proud Boys sort of getting into a scuffle. What they had was a moment where some of them could commit violence for the cause and sort of earn that badge of honor and that distinction. And it's intentional. And when Gavin McInnes founded it, he described it very proudly as a gang. He really believes that there needs to be sort of a pro-violence movement at the tip of the spear for the larger, men's rights and anti-PC movement. And he's pretty unabashed about the fact that violence is a necessary and effective tool. And that's kind of where the sort of the culture part of it comes in, right? That when you're sort of moving people through those levels, a part of that is actually to indoctrinate and to get people comfortable, just like any gang, with increasing levels of activities. So it goes from being sort of strange and weird to, starting to create those moments of hazing and more intense camaraderie, to outwardly conditioning people and incentivizing acts of violence.
What if you know what is this all about? Where they don't masturbate, and how do they? I mean, we'll get on to the more serious aspects of it, but it's people should know this is a very bizarre group, and I happen to. Have known Gavin McInnes socially years ago. We will talk about that in a moment. But what is the theory behind telling the members of this gang that you're not allowed to masturbate, and how do they regulate that?
I think it's an honor system, and I think that's really a part of it. The theory behind it, I think, is partly connected to a few things. One is that there's this. It's gay to touch yourself a little bit. It's a little feminizing or beta. This is according to sort of their tenets. That there's this hyper masculinity associated with being a Proud Boy, which seems strange given the name, but and that even doing that act alone is somehow a part of it. The deeper piece, though, is less about their hyper-masculine approach and actually more about creating a shared sacrifice and to incentivize, more group activities. The idea is that when somebody moves to that level of commitment, it actually coincides with a hazing experience. And a piece of that is actually that you're sort of bonding a little bit more with the group, and it's like a gang, right? The idea is to really tether you more to a community in a weird way than to yourself. And so as a part of that, presumably, and as it typically is the case, you actually spend more time at Proud Boy meetings and with other Proud Boys, and you sort of move deeper into this organization.
So now you refer to this gang as being centered around the men's rights movement and Western chauvinism. Why do you not use the term white supremacist?
I think that that's too easy and too simple. And I actually think that it's not because I don't think that they have a part of their. It's not because I don't think that race is a big piece of their organizing principle. It's just too simple. And I think these days the sort of knee-jerk reaction, oftentimes when these things break into the public, is because we think about this kind of activity in the past, typically associated with white nationalists and white supremacists, and because that's often our frame of reference, that's immediately where we go to when we see groups like this, because it feels very similar. And there is no doubt that bigotry and racism and very much anti-LGBT discrimination are a part of their brand, but it's bigger than that. And it isn't purely limited. Their organizing principle is not around race. In fact, as evidence of that, actually at Proud Boy meetings is where actual white nationalist organizations will try to find recruits, because there tends to be very intense alignment. But it isn't the sole their organizing principle. And so I think it's I think it's just a little misleading. And there are people of color that are part of the Proud Boy community. And so when you say that they're a white nationalist group, and then they're like, it actually makes it harder to get to what they're really organizing around. And that's the part that scares me, because they are much more appealing than say the white nationalists are. When you look at Charlottesville, what you saw on display at Charlottesville, not the night of the tiki torches, but on that Saturday when there were all those people there, one of the ways that so many came together was that Proud Boy chapters had actually activated themselves, as well as other men's rights organizations, to say, go out and protest political correctness. And so there is something much more appealing and broad about that than simply, white genocide and, white culture is dying and being destroyed. And so I think it's important to be aware of that.
All right. Well, Angelo, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about how they see themselves in terms of these shock troops for the conservative movement that you call, that I think we could say is, they're white supremacist friendly, right? Like they're allies of these folks. And then let's talk about Gavin McInnes. I have some personal experience with this guy. We shared some former friends of his, because and in many ways, this is a cautionary tale. sometimes it's very hard to watch your friends get super wealthy when you just get a little bit wealthy. And if you have the right sort of, I guess, emotional problems, it will turn into something like this. We will talk more about that when we return. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio.